थैंक्स इधर रखवाता हूँ, उधर ही रखवा दे सेटिंग। आई डोंट नो, अभी इधर रख दे। हमारे पैर ओपन मान रखे हैं वैसे। बस करा या हाँ वही आई मीन लास्ट हो गया ना। Lastly, we move on to the we move on to agricultural reform. ऐसा लिखो।
हेलो हेलो हेलो। हेलो हेलो चेक।
हाँ, अब जो भी आया आगे सुनते रहो।
और मैं भी आगे बैठ रही हूँ राइट अप कॉल लिख रहे हैं
अच्छे था।
और नोट राइट अप वाले बन गया सामने बैठे क्या बैठे
ये फैकल्टी है
यहाँ पर खाली रहेगा यार
अभी मजाक मत कर, पहले क्वेश्चन टाइम नहीं है यार, मजाक नहीं है। वही अच्छी तरह राइटिंग क्लास रख दिया मैंने।
और मेरा आईटी फैक्टर लग गया
अब छोटे को बोल नहीं पाते। हाँ भाई ट्रेन वाले में पता है डेढ़ दिन का क्वेश्चन ही है, उन्होंने क्वेश्चन
छोटा सा और बैंकिंग का कैसे देखो
पता क्या बोल रहा है
किसको दे रहे तुम याद है ना
वो जब किट वापस दो ना मतलब बॉक्स के अंदर रख के देना कल ऑफ करके क्लब में मतलब बॉक्स में रख के हो जाएगा। हाँ जब वापस दो ना हाँ और सुनना हम लोग सोच रहे हैं कि वो फोटो और उसको साथ में दें या फिर अलग अलग दें कैसे देंगे तो अलग अलग देना है बिल्कुल तो दोगे उसके बाद फोटो देंगे ना साइन कर दूंगा साइन ऑफ मेमोर और एक बात ध्यान रखना यहाँ पे जो भी एमसी होगा वो कैमरा पे लाइव रिकॉर्ड होगा तो गर्दन वर्दन इनकी नहीं होनी चाहिए सोता नहीं होना चाहिए बातें नहीं करनी चाहिए चैट नहीं कर रहा सब रिकॉर्ड होता है यहाँ पे जो बैठा अबे साले मेरे पेपर बोर्ड तो बिंदर वो लोग आ रहे हैं उनको आगे बैठा बोल दे कि कंपलसरी लेट आए आपको आगे बैठा अरे यहाँ है यार आगे की सीट पे लोग नहीं पीछे से लोगों को बुलाना पड़ेगा
भी ये फिल करवाओ वहाँ पे वो वाला टेबल फिल करवाओ और उधर वाला टेबल ये तो पीछे वालों को उठा के
या भाई हाँ रख दिए हो रहे 3 और नहीं है कल अब खत्म हो गए हैं अब ये है कि 3 ही है ऑफ कर दे तू अपना ऑफ कर दे मैं दे रहा हूँ ऑफ कर दे हेलो ऑफ है अच्छा सारे एक बार इधर आओ कोई आराम नहीं कर रहा है और सुनो
यहाँ से ऑफ कर
you guys should not look there and अभी थोड़ा यहाँ देख लो
अरे
यहाँ से
माइक
जब
यहाँ से ऑन कर लेना
अभी ऑन करता हूँ यार, वो बंद करो। हाँ हो गया।
हेलो।
बंद कर दिया। वहाँ रख दिया ना, तो वहाँ बैठ रहे हैं ना, बैठ रहे हैं, पता नहीं। मेरा चीज हो एक एक्स्ट्रा है माइक। बस ऑन के सिर्फ ऊपर प्रेस है ना, इसमें हार्ड प्रेस 2 मिनट 1 मिनट दबा के 3 मिनट नहीं ये देगा, येलो लाइट आ जाएगी ना तो बाद हम बता सकते हैं। आगे बैठ के सो रहे हो? ठीक है, सो जाएगा।
Guys, please maintain silence. The speakers will be here soon. If anybody has not submitted their phones, please submit it right now and switch it off also. हाँ ठीक है.
one from you. And then two good. Just one from. बाकी आपको कुछ कंटेंट वो this thing will. We are the ones sitting over.
Guys, the speakers have arrived. Please maintain silence.
एक बार मैंने एक ही सुना हुआ है चल के मेरा कमेंट
Distinguished guests, members of faculty, and my fellow future managers. A very good morning to one and all. Welcome to the third day of Conventus 2016, the annual management conclave of International Management Institute, New Delhi. I, Samarth Shastri, and my co-compare Anushri Gambhir will take you through this session of the Economics Club of IMI. This year, Conventus is structured around the theme Transforming Corporate India, Transcending Innovation Towards Strategic Sustenance. India today is in uncharted waters with never seen before growth in the business world. And with the increasing number of startups, SBUs, and subsidiaries adding to the burgeoning number of businesses, innovation is no longer sufficient for any business to survive, let alone to be able to thrive. Corporate India needs to strategize this vision for the future and sustenance in mind. With a multitude of companies now offering the same product, which earlier used to be offered by just a few, it is understandable that the life cycle has considerably reduced. However, this shouldn't be taken as an excuse to give up, rather as a challenge to overcome. All that needs to be done is to strategize the corporate world in whichever way it suits businesses, such that they transcend beyond innovation and entered into the realm of strategic sustenance. Hence, the industry should prepare for the long term survival in today's fast changing and constantly evolving market space. Before we proceed further into the session, let us have a look at the Conventus video.
The topic for discussion in this session is Strengthening India's Ecosystem, Working Towards Sustainability. India's recent economic performance is a result of swift growth generated by key structural drivers, including a dynamic private sector, benign external environment, and good corporate governance. In the light of main theme of Conventus 2016, the Economic Club wishes to discuss how the economic reforms must be built the hard way via a pragmatic caucus of public, business, and non-profit leaders who can spur economic recovery and renewal from the ground up, despite fiscal obstacles and long political odds. The time is ripe for India to champion industries that will herald a new transformation of the Indian corporates. Hence, the way forward must be an all-round approach along with innovative policies in different sectors to foster strong linkages among them that not only aims at building world-class competitive economy, but also utilizing these linkages for a sustainable economic growth to positively renovate the economy. To give us more insight into this topic, we are honored to have amongst us four very eminent personalities: Dr. Arvind Prasad, Dr. Vivek Suneja, Dr. Simrit Kaur, and Mr. Prabhudat Mishra. To give us more information on today's session, I would now like to call upon Bhavna Satija and Mayank Deswal from the Economics Club of IMI to make a brief presentation and video on the session.
Thank you, Anushree and Samad. It gives us immense pleasure to welcome you all once again to the Economic Summit of Conventus 2016. India is the fastest growing economy in the world. It has undergone a paradigm shift owing to its competitive stand. Although the country has come a long way with a high growth rate and foreign reserves being at an all time high, there are various issues which are still restraining India from achieving a double digit growth. Stressed assets aggregating to rupees 8 lakh crores and a complex banking structure are limiting the growth of public sector banks, which account for a major sum of the country's GDP. The Government of India is working towards sustainability by launching new initiatives, primarily in the four major sectors of our economy: manufacturing, banking, agriculture, and the service sector. Ladies and gentlemen, before we take the discussion forward, let us have a quick look at the video.
We will now give a brief introduction about each sector of the Indian economy. To begin with, let us look at the manufacturing sector. India accounts for 1.8% of the world's total manufacturing output. For the year 2015-16, the growth of the manufacturing sector outperformed the GDP growth rate by 2.2 percentage points. There is potential for the sector to account for 25 to 30% of the country's GDP. However, there are major challenges to be surpassed. Low level of research and development and inadequate availability of skilled manpower adversely affect the India's competitiveness and the manufacturing growth. Landmark initiatives like Make in India, Startup India, and Digital India are expected to provide impetus to manufacturing. The real concern is whether the initiatives taken up by the government in the manufacturing sector will be sufficient to propel India to a double-digit growth and sustain this growth.
Moving on to the next topic for today's discussion, the services sector is the key driver of India's economic growth, with a contribution of about 64% to the GDP this year, the highest amongst all sectors. It has also managed to become the most attractive sector for FDI inflows. Despite the stellar contribution to the GDP, there still exist a few grey areas. Employment levels in this sector are not in tandem with its contribution to GDP. Further, the government has taken several measures to improve the performance of non IT services that include introducing e tourist visa facilities in the tourism sector, establishing programs such as the Atal Innovation Mission and Self-Employment and Talent Utilization Program in R&D services, to name a few. So the real question is how to push employment levels in this sector and strengthen the contribution of non-IT subsectors so as to achieve a holistic and sustainable services-led growth in the country.
Next, we have the banking sector. The Indian banking sector's assets reached 1.8 trillion US dollars in financial year 2014, with 70% of it being accounted by the public sector. Total asset size is expected to increase to 28.5 trillion US dollars by 2025. But as a matter of concern, the Indian banks are grappling with about 120 billion US dollars in stressed loans. The non-performing assets of banks have risen to 9.32% in March 2016. The roadmap leading to consolidation of financial sector and inorganic growth of banks continue to exist in the industry. The government has taken steps to recapitalize 8 public sector banks by 5,000 crores. Also, the new initiatives like Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana, the Debt Recovery Tribunal, and Indradhanush aim for digitization and financial inclusion. However, are the current schemes in the Indian banking system viable, or do we need a feasible solution so as to attain a sustainable growth in this sector?
The last topic for today's discussion would be agricultural reforms. Despite 49.7% of India's population being dependent on agriculture for their livelihood, the sector contributes only 16% to the total GDP. Ever-growing increase in farmers' suicides and the declining productivity have been serious causes of concern. To address these issues, the government has made a record allocation of Rs 36,000 crores towards this sector in our last budget. Schemes like Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana have been launched with the aim to double farmers' income by 2022. However, there are a few challenges to these schemes. Raising productivity requires massive investments in R&D, irrigation, and fertilizers. Compared to China, India is way behind in all these factors, and not surprisingly, our productivity levels in almost all crops range between 50 to 75% to that of China's level. So the real concern is whether the implementation of these schemes can actually benefit the declining agricultural sector.
Now the question arises if the ever-growing number of challenges faced by these sectors are being effectively tackled by the government. The new schemes put forth by the government provide a platform, but will they prove to be sustainable in the long run? I now request Anushri and Samath to welcome our esteemed guests.
It gives me great honor to introduce Dr. Arbind Prasad, our first panelist for the day. Dr. Arbind Prasad was the ex-Director General at the Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry, FICCI. He has over 30 years of experience as an IAS officer. Prior to joining FICCI, he was the Senior Advisor, Power and Energy of Odisha and West Bengal in Planning Commission. He was on the Board of Directors of Nuclear Power Corporation of India Limited and Bharatiya Vidyut Nigam. He has also served as the Joint Secretary, Social Defence in the Government of India, where he was responsible for formulation and implementation of policies relating to social defence, resettlement, and rehabilitation for the subgroups of Narmada Control Authority, Central Sector Scheme of Special Central Assistance, etc. Sir, we are privileged to have you here with us today. As a token of our gratitude, we would request Professor V.K. Seth to present you with the bouquet. We welcome you, sir.
It gives me great honor to introduce our next panelist, Professor Vivek Suneja. Professor Suneja is currently Professor of Strategy at FMS University of Delhi. As a field scholar, he studied for and obtained his doctoral degree from the University of Reading in the UK. He subsequently taught at universities in Britain between 1995 and 2005, including at the University of Salford, Manchester, and the Open University Business School. Upon his return to India in 2005, he joined FMS as a professor. He has served as Dean of Planning at the University of Delhi between 2006 and 2013, and Pro Vice Chancellor of the University of Delhi between 2010 and 2013. Professor Suneja has published several books and papers in the areas of strategy, economics, and public policy. Among his prominent books are Markets, a multidimensional approach to the market economy, published by Routledge UK, and Policy Issues for Business, published by Sage UK. He is a prominent speaker at conferences and seminars. Sir, we are privileged to have you with us here today. As a token of our gratitude, we would request Professor Arnab Deb to kindly present you with a bouquet. We welcome you, sir.
It gives me great honor to introduce our next panelist, Dr. Simrit Kaur. Dr. Simrit Kaur is a professor of public policy at the Faculty of Management Studies, University of Delhi, where she has been teaching the economics theory of a firm, macroeconomics, and public policy reforms for over 2 decades. She is a trained economist with a master's in economics from Delhi School of Economics, University of Delhi. Dr. Kaur has also acted as an advisor to the organizations such as Ministry of Finance, the National Council of Applied Economic Research, that is NCAER, and Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, of the United Nations. Dr. Kaur's book, Privatization and Public Regulation, The Indian Experience, published by Macmillan, has received the Best Book Award. Ma'am, we are privileged to have you with us today. As a token of our gratitude, we would request Professor V.K. Seth to present you with a bouquet.
Thank you so much. It's so delight to be interacting with you.
We welcome you, ma'am.
It gives me great honor to introduce our next panelist, Mr. Prabhudatta Mishra. Sir is currently working as a special correspondent with Financial Chronicle. He has been covering agriculture for past 13 years. He has witnessed how government policy can bring growth in agriculture sector. He has also researched and written reports on agriculture, food, and fertilizer ministries. As a special correspondent at Financial Chronicle, he has written many reports and stories. Some of the stories written by him revolve around the new farm policy, finance ministry and its recommendations to SEBI, etc. He has also worked as a reporter at Bloomberg News. As a principal correspondent of Press Trust of India, he has also written extensively on spot markets and future markets. Sir, we are privileged to have you with us here today. As a token of our gratitude, I request Professor Arnab Deb to kindly present you with a bouquet. We welcome you, sir.
Our moderator for the session is Dr. Rajiv Anantram. Dr. Anantram is Professor of Economics at the International Management Institute since March 2012. He holds a PhD in Public Policy and Applied Economics from the University of Pittsburgh and Masters in Public Policy from Syracuse University. Dr. Anantram has extensive professional experience in India and the United States. Prior to joining IMI, he was senior economist and head with Standard & Poor's in its New Delhi office. Senior fellow and professor at the Indian Council for Research on International Economic Relations. Senior associate editor at the Business Standard newspaper and an emerging leader fellow at the Australian Indies Institute at the University of Melbourne. He has been the principal author of studies on FDI, driven mass manufacturing in China for the Asian Development Bank, internationalization of R&D in select developing countries, and a study of electric power sector in India. He has also done comparative research study on innovative policies in China, Taiwan, and Korea for the National Research Development Corporation. Sir, we are privileged to have you here with us today. As a token of our respect, we would request Pratik Gupta, Secretary of Economics Club of IMI, to present you with a bouquet. We welcome you, sir. Without further ado, I once again welcome all the guests and request Professor Rajiv Anantram to initiate the session.
Sir, however you.
Good morning. Before proceeding any further, I'd like to congratulate the Economics Committee for putting together this really wonderful and high energy session so early in the morning on a Sunday. Takes a lot. I must acknowledge the support of my colleagues in making this happen. They worked behind the scenes very diligently, very low profile, but this wouldn't have happened without them. Arnab Deb and Professor V.K. Seth. So we're really grateful to them for their quiet and sustained guidance. While Bhavna and her colleague were speaking, I was wondering if there was anything left for me and our colleagues to actually even say. So one suggestion was just we pack up and leave. So, but then, thanks, it was a good introduction. Today's session is actually very important for a couple of reasons. We keep talking about economic growth. We keep talking about what's happening, 7%. We get fixated on the numbers. We squabble over them. We talk about what the reasons could be, whether it's interest rates, whether it's this or that that's driving down this thing. But today's discussion actually focuses on the micro foundations of sustained economic growth. So we've identified 4 sectors: manufacturing, services, banking, and agriculture. Okay. A lot remains to be done. Now, India is a very different place in 1991. We all know we're celebrating 25 years of reform this year. 25 years have truly transformed India. And while the jury is still out on the extent of qualitative difference these 25 years have made, okay, fact remains that India is a very different place. Like I said, it's an incomplete agenda. Have institutional reforms gone deep enough? Everyone talks about the problems of still doing ease of business. Okay, they say the license Raj has been replaced with a permission Raj. Okay, which still means inordinate delays in getting to work. The more important this thing is about redistribution. Just before we started, Professor Suneja and I were talking about, and all of us, I mean, several of us were talking about employability. What good is growth if people can't be assured of sustained employment that guarantees income and a better quality of life, a better standard of living at the very least? One other thing why today's discussion is very important is we're talking about sustainability. The conventional paradigm of growth is that you grow first. Okay? You grow first and then take care of problems that have been created in the process. So China, for example, the country to which I think we are unfairly compared, focused on export and investment-led growth. Now, this is an extremely ecologically damaging and ecologically taxing kind of model of growth. When they reached a certain level, an absolute level, okay, of economic power, it's only then that they decided to do the recalibration. So if India actually succeeds in introducing issues of sustainability at the very outset, okay, and then grows accordingly, it would not just be a different paradigm, it would be an absolutely novel paradigm. Because even in the West, okay, the model was first, grow first, and then take care of problems later. China only followed what happened elsewhere. So I'm glad we've identified those sectors, and this can essentially be far-reaching. While my colleagues have been formally welcomed, I would like to formally welcome all of them, once again on my own behalf. One thing, the way we've structured this discussion is as follows. I'd first like to invite all my colleagues to make a brief presentation, just give a snapshot of what they think, where the Indian economy stands, identify the problems, etc. The problems, the opportunities, the challenges, what we've done well, what we haven't, a quick 2, 3, 4-minute snapshot. In the second level of discussion, the second question that we'll discuss would be sector-specific reforms and where we go from here. And the third idea is sustainability. What can be done to actually address the problems that have not been addressed in previous rounds of reform, and how far the reform process needs to go. We've decided, among ourselves, to make this student-centered, because last time I was here, students didn't get, we obviously, not on purpose, not deliberately, but students had far more questions than they were actually allowed to ask. So this time we'll try to make a difference and try to get more student questions in, because after all, it is your session. It's for you. And I really hope we all benefit from it. And so let's start the first round of questions. And here I'd just like to have, just going from right to left, each expert giving us his snapshot, his or her snapshot of what he thinks, where the Indian economy stands, what the opportunities are, where we've done well, and what challenges still remain. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure talking to you here. It will not be a speech, and during my regular day-to-day coverage of agriculture sector, I have come across certain facts and some observations I have, which I want to share with you. When we are talking about agriculture, you must be aware of the government's policy declaration that it wants to double the farmers' income in 6 years. That is the most critical for the economy, because whole lot of rural India economy is based on farmers' income. And if farmers' income are to be doubled in 6 years, that will be the key to the rural demand. So you can see if that is going to happen, then the entire rural landscape will change. The demand will come from that sector. But whether that is going to happen or not, we can't judge right now. Government is seized of the matter. Niti Aayog has been doing a study how to do it. Prime Minister has outlined some of the strategies, 7-point strategy he has set, so that farmers' income will be doubled. But before that, I collected some data. The all India average of farmers' income is 6,426 per month. So when I spoke to officials when this was announced, they said that it is not our intention that we should double the all India average, because the difference between states are very wide. For example, if you take Punjab, the income in Punjab is 18,000, whereas you talk about Bihar, the income is 3,558. So they said that it is very easy to double the income in Bihar, rather than it is a very difficult task if you talk about Punjab. So what they are looking at, at least the small and marginal farmers in the less those states who have not got the opportunity of fast green revolution, in the eastern states particularly, at least there should be some kind of increase that is practical. So the focus is not that the government is firmly believed that the income will be double, but they said that this is a target. Unless you have a target, it is difficult to proceed. So that's why they have set a target, and accordingly they will proceed. But by and large, they are convinced that it can be done at least by 60% in 6 years. That is a reasonable one.
Thank you, sir. It was a very important exposition of what's going on in the agricultural sector. I now invite Professor Simrit Kaur to give her impressions of the Indian economy. Just a general snapshot.
Thank you so much. With your permission, if it's okay, I'll just get it. Thank you. Good morning, all of you. It is a Sunday morning, so we don't intend to get into the real intensive economics to begin the session. It's going to be a kind of a storytelling based upon aspects which your department only invited me to speak on. It was largely to touch on manufacturing with a special focus on the public sector, and then divert and also talk about the agriculture sector. Also, I would seek I have several of my colleagues, I have Professor Suneja on the dais. He's a senior colleague at FMS. And I actually thought the system is going to start from there and it's going to come like that, the way we were introduced. And now I'm speaking before him, so I seek his permission to do that. I respect and admire him a lot. And then there are so many other colleagues. It's really a value addition for me to be hearing from such expert opinion from our Financial Chronicle and from our FICCI expert. Also, association with IMI has been great. Dr. VK Seth, I hold him very high regard. He's a product of FMS. We were very good colleagues, more than colleagues, friends. And Professor Suneja is also from FMS, and we are from the same department teaching. He specializes in strategy and economics, and I am more on the economic side. Also, we've been given probably 20 minutes or so. And as a teacher, it's no problem. We can go on for 2 hours as well as 20 minutes. So I look upon the moderator here, but I'll try and stick to the stipulated time, of which about 17 or 16 minutes is now left. Starting again from the original story. There are 3 rounds. Okay, so the introductory, okay, I was informed it's a 20-minute one session. Okay, so introductory remarks would be, so it's about 3 or 4 minutes of introductory reforms, setting the agenda. The entire discussion of the entire macroeconomics has to be settled upon what was the philosophy behind the economic strategy that was adopted. This boils down to the 1947 and the first 5-year reforms, 1951 and onwards. Not to mention the Nehruvian philosophy, who was highly motivated by the Russian growth development model. And Mahalanobis was actually sent to Russia to study the model and then kind of adopt the same thing in the Indian economy, primarily from the second 5-year reforms, which was heavy investment in the industrial sector, and within the industrial sector, the heavy and the basic sector. Somewhere down the line, this involved sectors which were heavy in investment. And according to the Bombay plan, the private investors, the Tatas and the Birlas, were not so much interested to take the front lead in the development process. And that's the way the public sector actually had to take the commanding heights of the Indian economy. And since I've been asked more to concentrate on the public sector, I will be focusing again what was the motivation to lead the public sector, what went wrong, and as a result of which, why from the nationalization stream we went over to the privatization stream, And is privatization the end for a sustainable development pattern? That's the question that ultimately needs to be addressed, which we will be discussing. And the second part would be the agriculture sector. In the agriculture sector, and surprisingly, I'm interacting with a setup from the corporate world who are not going to join the public sector, largely speaking, and would probably not even be associated with the agriculture sector. But since it's an economic summit, it is very important for you to come out of your corporate world and your suited booted and also reflect on the ample number of suicides that are taking place in the agricultural sector. But of late, where several managers have now realized the true potential of the agricultural sector. It's the bottom of the pyramid where largely a large part of the demand is there. So if you want to be a demand-led growth, the demand which is originating from the agriculture sector. And when we talk about the agriculture sector, it's the rural sector, primarily dominated by the agriculture farm sector and the non-farm sector. And the potential of sustainability would come from both the farm as well as the non-farm sector. What has gone wrong with the agricultural sector? None of the economic reforms talked about the agricultural sector per se. Only of late, we are now talking about both farm as well as non-farm sector. And then what are the cases, how to bring about these reforms for sustainable growth is probably to be taken up at a later stage. Thank you so much. I have a problem with my foot, so I would prefer to get up if allowed. Sitting on a low seat is a little troublesome for me.
I'd like now request Professor Suneja.
Thank you, Rajiv. Some of the keywords for Conventus as well as for the Economics Club sub-theme, I notice are strategy, sustainability, innovation, ecosystem, and then, of course, the word sectorial. So we will be talking about specific sectors. I just want to touch upon some of the things I have in mind which cut across sectors. First is business of strategy. So does India have a strategy? Is a strategy a purely an economic strategy? What is the Indian dream? Is it the American dream? Is that what we want to do? Make India a mini version of the United States of America going forward? Or is the Indian dream wider than the strictly economic dream that many Americans seem to dream about? So yes, indeed, we need economic prosperity. But is it brand consciousness that we're going to emulate? Is it needs or is it greed that we're going to cater to going forward? And that has important implications for sustainability. Rajiv mentioned about environmental sustainability, the kind of problems that China is facing. What about Delhi, the most polluted city on earth, or even notwithstanding? The hottest summer on record ever since climate records began. And this is the capital of the country. But we have deforestation, we have soil erosion, Uttarakhand floods, and so forth. So major issues as to whether this consumerist ideology, shopping in malls, which we have air conditioning of large volumes of space, guzzling water for the air conditioning, is this sustainable? A related theme is rural-urban migration. Now, typically in the West, including in the US, where Raj stayed for so long, none of the Western economies harbor more than 5% people in rural areas. Everybody else has moved to the cities. That's the historical trajectory. Imagine that happening in a country like ours, that is a 95% urbanization rate. That would be the largest ever migration of a rural to urban population in absolute numbers. It is unprecedented in world history. Can we sustain that? Can we sustain that environmentally? Can we sustain that in a social sense? Where do we get the resources for? How many smart cities are we going to build? Now, if we are going to find a paradigm, as Raji was saying, where we think differently, where we don't go down the historical route. So if you go to Amsterdam or Copenhagen today, everybody's on a bicycle, but they were in cars earlier. Are we going to go down the same route? First have cars, then have odd even, then go to bicycle, or can we hop over? Can we have Tesla cars now, rather than go down the oil guzzling route and have Tesla cars later. With the internet, the need for agglomeration of people in physical spaces should disappear to a large extent. I mean, in corporate, it's happening all the time. We are working from home in many companies. Accenture, a lot of people are working at home now. Video conferencing is replacing flying to meet people. So if you have a good technological cable or mobile internet facility in our villages, can we decentralize economic activity so that everybody moving from small towns and rural into larger, smarter towns, can we decentralize economic activity? Now that requires some blue skies, innovative, redesigned thinking. And I don't think we're thinking on a big scale at that level. Can we create non-farm employment? You know, GDP has accelerated in a major way in the post-liberalization period, but the employment elasticity of GDP growth is abysmal, especially in the organized sector. So can we create non-farm jobs in the rural sector? If so, how? Can a Fab India, yes, can that model survive and be accelerated in many ways in the rural economy? So these are some of the broad questions that we need to think about. And I'll have something to say more about other challenges. My last word, perhaps, which I want to touch upon, is education and health. Two of the major shortcomings in our economic story. And unless rural education and rural health, where we are pathetic in world terms, unless we can do something there, then neither this urban-rural migration question can be addressed, nor the natural environment question. So these are some of the broad themes that any sustainable economic growth strategy must address. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Suneja. I'd now like to invite Prasad to say a few words.
I'm on the rightmost side, so I can take the podium without disturbing anyone. So, very distinguished, the panelists, faculty members, and the students. I really thank IMI for inviting me to their conference. It is a second opportunity for me. And the last time I found the students their questions very intelligent, very deep-rooted, and I really like to see the similar insightful questions in the coming sessions. Though I have been asked, I was asked to give the overview or some view, but being the last speaker, I have a tendency to react rather than, so I'll try to keep the balance on both the sides. First, you saw the agriculture presentation. The figure gives the problem and solutions. We had that almost 50% employment and 16% GDP. If you go state-wise, Mr. Misra mentioned about it, it is even more challenging. Some states, for example, Tamil Nadu, the GDP contribution from agriculture is only 7%. Employment is about 23-24%. If you go to Bihar, it may be 28% of GDP comes from agriculture, and about more than 53-54%, around 56% employment. So the first point as agriculture is, how do you shift large number of people from agricultural sector to non-agricultural sector? So the panelists mentioned about a non-farm sector, and also rural-urban migration also gave some hint about the solution. In my view, what Professor Smrit Kaur was mentioning, that many of you will not be going to agriculture. I'll just try to, or the migration, I'll just try to draw your attention to some of the major programs and schemes, and then I'll try to draw your attention to the opportunities in rural areas. So agriculture, improvement of agriculture is giving an opportunity, not just to create demands in rural areas, shift rural population to non-farm sectors, but there are real good opportunities there. I'll just draw attention to 3-4 schemes. First, Digital India. He has already mentioned about the mobile, but essentially what it will tell once it is implemented with real and sincere efforts, that in every village you will have the same kind of information which you have in Delhi or any major cities. So the Digital India provides opportunities for entrepreneurship, for information, but it also will change the ground rule as far as availability of information is concerned, either in cities or in urban areas. Then Jan Dhan Yojana. In Jan Dhan Yojana, there is a financial inclusion. So there is every effort that you will have access to the same financial infrastructure and services in rural areas, which is available in urban areas. You have renewables, reinvest, what Government of India has announced. There is an intense focus on renewable energies, be it solar, be it bioenergy, in long run, even geothermal. So that major disadvantage of rural areas of energy is likely to be solved. So you'll have access to information, you'll have access to finance, you'll have access to energy. Combined with, if you see the ease of doing business, which we'll majorly discuss in the context of manufacturing and make in India, but it is also very relevant for small entrepreneurs, because large corporates can still manage, and in fact they have been managing the very convoluted system of governance. But for a startup, for a small person, for the person like you who will like to enter, do a small business service in a small ways, ease of doing business is really very critical, because large corporates can keep manpower to tackle energy sector, to tackle electricity board, to tackle service, taxes, tackle bureaucracy. But for a startup, it is even more difficult. So if you focus on ease of doing business, combine this with a skill development. Professor talked about education sector. Now, through the implementation of RTE, there has been a large base of students who are educated, and we have reasonably done very well in terms of higher education. If you see the last 6-7 years, the number of universities, which was just 350 last 7-6 years back, is now 750. Almost for last 7 years, we have been opening one new university every week, and we will continue to do this for another 15 years. It is a very, it's just expanding like anything. It's literally, if you see the figures, in 7 years back, we had 350 universities. Today, we have 750 universities. So on an average, we are opening one university per week. But what we really lack, and we call the quality of education, we essentially need vocational type. We don't need everyone, researcher, scientist, and we need people who will work, we have the basic information. So the focus on skill development. He also mentioned about the healthcare and education. In addition, if you see the launch of universal social security schemes, one reason large number of people seek employment in organized sector, either in government or in the corporates, is social security. Everybody is afraid of emergency situation. What will happen if you lose your job? What will happen if you have a healthcare problem? So universal social security mechanism, where you find that at least a basic reasonable healthcare, social security, unemployment allowance, all those will be provided. I will urge upon you to look upon the opportunities rural India provides with the kind of information, financial services, skill development, energy level, and you can really look to the smaller, all kind of different services, be it education, healthcare, technical, agriculture, farm, food processing industry. There's huge opportunities there. So that is one part I will mention about it. Second, about the banking sector. The NPAs and the figure you quoted is really very challenging. And to the extent that banking sector would have any difficulties, it will not be just the financial or banking sector which will be impacted. The whole economy might get impacted, particularly in savings. Large number of people, Jan Dhan Yojana, the whole effort is to connect everyone, even in smaller villages, to the banking system so that you can channelize their savings to the productive assets. Now, if there is any doubt about the viability of banking sector, large number of people will again move to the traditional, not productive assets like gold. And therefore, and also remember, in our country, the major social security mechanism, even for the middle class, comes from savings which you deposit in banks. So if there is any doubt, even the retirees, even those who have, money for the emergency situation, so that has a very great potential of destabilizing the economy if the banking sector in any way, particularly in terms of NPAs, gets affected. Fortunately, and also the way to handle it is even more difficult. If you become too aggressive in terms of trying to identify, penalize, and all that, then it will impact both the banking system of decision making. In future lending, it will be very difficult. Okay, so I'll just finish. So that is one area. So how do you tackle the entire banking sector? Service sectors, of course, healthcare, education, in addition to tourism, transportations you have mentioned. Professor Rajiv is rightly hinting we'll have opportunities to go on each sectors during the discussion. Thank you.
I'd like to thank the panel for some very important comments. Two comments by the earlier speakers were more specialized. They pertain to agriculture, though Professor Simrit Kaur did touch upon manufacturing as well. Professor Suneja spoke about more an ecological perspective that included everything that looked at the explicit costs of growth. I mean, you're growing, but what price are you paying for it? And that was, as I've mentioned in my introductory remarks, the theme of this conference. I mean, the central theme of this conference. I mean, we're growing all right, but at what cost? And what is the price we pay in terms of our well-being? To what extent are we willing to make that trade-off? Professor Prasad also mentioned, gave again a very broad-based kind of discussion. I mean, I'm really sorry to have had to interrupt him. Very interesting, touched upon many points, like the various schemes that the government is doing for financial inclusion, provision of rural energy, energizing the rural electrification, etc., plus issues of health, skill development, the banking sector. Now, it's time, I think, to move on to individual sectors. In agriculture, as was mentioned by a previous speaker, our approach has been to give it the short shrift. Now, even if only 15% or 16% is coming of GDP is coming from agriculture, it does employ 50%. Some say it's even more. The number is really more. And that explains rural poverty. 55% contributing only 15% of GDP. Traditionally, the reforms for all that they've done to transform India were essentially top-down. We need a bottom-up approach. One reason why China succeeded in moving people out of agriculture into manufacturing and industry, what they call the Chenery Circuit kind of transition in development economics, was possible because of a simultaneous development of human capital alongside. So somebody could make that transition from agriculture to low-skilled labor, which was the basis of China's economic development. FDI-driven, mass-produced, labor-intensive industry. Okay, that was what drove China. It's only now that they're actually scaling up, both in terms of technological sophistication and in the scale of manufacturing. So this session of questions will actually refer to specific reforms that I think need to be undertaken. So we'll first start with agriculture. What is it that needs to be done? We'll start with micro-level reforms. Essentially, the prices of inputs, the prices of outputs, and then what the implications are. So if the agricultural sector has to grow, as my former colleague, Professor Ashok Gulati, arguably India's preeminent agricultural economist has been saying, unless agriculture takes off, we're getting nowhere. Next, we'll come to manufacturing, and I'll request Professor Simrit Kaur to essentially focus in this round on manufacturing. What needs to be done? Why is Make in India a non-starter? Why is that number of 25% still a mirage? Why is it a receding number? We're stuck at 16% of GDP. Can we ever become a Brazil with 30-35%? Forget China. Even a Brazil at 30-35% for 20 years. Can we ever do that? Would it be possible, more importantly, for having made that leapfrog? I thought it was an illusory leap. I think it's an illusory leapfrogging when we moved from agriculture to services. Now we've got to go back. Is that possible? What kind of structural changes would be required in the Indian economy, having once made that leapfrog, to come back? So I'd like Professor Simrit Kaur to touch a little upon that. There's the further issues of ecological sustainability. What kind of social policies are required as far as employment is concerned? Agriculture is growing, manufacture is growing. We want to make the transition. Services is already there, but then services growth is slowing down because the limits of specialization have been reached pretty much. Okay, so, and we've not made that transition to the next level. Infosys, whether it's computer, IT, or ITES, we're still stuck in the same rut. So limits of specialization have set in there, which is why it's not growing faster. It's not experiencing any kind of a paradigm shift. So I'd like Professor Suneja to speak on that. I would like to request Professor Prasad to essentially focus on banking sector reforms and skill development, because that touches upon everything. Manufacturing, services, all other sectors is highly dependent on having a critical mass of human capital, of employable human capital. So what policies need to be undertaken there? So I'll turn this thing on to Professor Prabhu Datta to speak on agriculture. You have to mic. You can stand whatever you have.
Yeah, coming to agriculture again. 2015-16, you are aware that agriculture grew at 1.2%. And prior to that, there was a negative growth, 0.2%. Despite 2 consecutive years of drought, last year the government claims that 1.2% growth has been achieved. So this year, everybody is expecting the growth should be at least 4%. The Niti Aayog member, Ramesh Chand, is even more positive. He is expecting 6% agriculture growth. So if that turns out at least 3% to 4% agriculture growth, definitely it is positive for the entire economy if we are able to achieve that growth. But when we are talking about agriculture, it is not only the crops production that the government is looking at while computing the agriculture growth. The entire agriculture sector includes fisheries, horticulture, poultry. So we don't realize the potential it has. But the growth definitely will be there because of monsoon is so far very good. One important aspect is I always believe that the agriculture credit the government has been raising every year budget. You must be hearing that. This year 9 lakh crore is the agriculture credit. So this is very critical to increase the rural economy. There are criticism that 10 to 20% are there is leakage in that are not coming to the farmers. Anyway, if you minus that also, it is a huge amount. So where is this 9 lakh crore if agriculture credit is passed on to farmers, where is this amount going? Farmers are spending where? Because the agricultural inputs are not that much that farmers need to spend. Definitely, farmers are spending in their own personal expenditure, also using that amount. That is understandable. But if the government is able to just transform this amount to the channelize this amount to proper way, then there will be a real revolution in this country. We can take agriculture to the next round of level. Another important area is production. When we are talking about agriculture production, whenever there is surplus production in any crop, if you take about dairy, if you take about poultry, there is always a price crash and farmers always cry. So to allow farmers have a sustainable price even in surplus year of production, that is very critical in agriculture and agriculture production. That government has not yet been able to address that sustainable production and sustainable price level. Yes, market economy, definitely in private sector you cannot control the price, but at least there should be some kind of a level where farmers should not feel dejected. That's why you have been seeing sometimes whenever there are crops higher, next year you will feel farmers have reduced the area. Now pulses prices have gone up, farmers have increased the area. If prices crash to next year, then again 1 year after you will see another drop in area. So here is where government policy is very critical to make it sustainable, so that we don't have to see a knee-jerk reaction in prices where prices have gone up to 200 rupees in pulses, and tomorrow if prices come down to below 100, then again you will see there may be a problem. One area is, yeah, I have collected some data about the credit to agriculture sector. During 81-91, the credit to agriculture grew at 6.8%, whereas in 2001 to 2011, in 10 years, the credit to agriculture grew at 17.8%. But look at the agriculture GDP. In 81-91, the agriculture GDP was 3.5%, whereas between 2001 and 11, it is 3.3%. Despite the credit to agriculture has increased so much tremendously, we have not been able to increase the agriculture GDP. So credit is very critical, but why it has not been translated into increasing the agriculture growth? That government must have to find an answer. Then you, in your presentation, you talked about the crop insurance scheme that government is talking about. But earlier I said about the doubling of farmers' income. Doubling of farmers' income is good, concept-wise good, but to link it with crop insurance, I doubt whether crop insurance will be able to increase the farmers' income. Crop insurance is essential for sustainable income for the farmers, to make sure that farmers get a sustainable income in case of there is any natural calamities happening, and but it will not increase their income level. one important aspect is mechanization. Mechanization is very important in India. We have very low level of mechanization. It is said that India is growing at less than 5% in farm mechanization, whereas the global is around 20 to 25%. We can definitely increase in that area, and that will increase the productivity level. When we are talking about shifting of farmers, you tell us which are the sectors that come to your mind where farmers can be shifted. Is it manufacturing? Is it services? Healthcare? Where farmers can be shifted? I was going through the statistics about the literacy level among farmers. How many of them are primary educated? How many have gone up to the secondary level? In all the sectors, it is the lowest, and comparable is nearest to each construction sector. Basically, it is the agricultural laborers who sometimes come as construction laborer and then return to as agricultural laborers. So that's why, yeah. Thank
Thank you, sir. There'll be a next round where actually sustainable reform will actually be discussed. So you will have an opportunity to convey to us.
Thank you so much. Thanks. I've been advised by Rajiv ji to discuss more on the Make in India and the manufacturing sector and move away from the public sector and agriculture. Perfectly fine, except that it may not be as much backed by data, but the economic arguments would certainly be there. So the questions that need to be addressed is why Make in India? And very importantly, what went wrong with the manufacturing sector so that now we are now talking about the Make in India campaign. I begin with the first, the rationale for the Make in India. Very often when I talk to people who are at the lower rung, let's say class 4 employees, they have been very often saying that the present Prime Minister on a daily basis is traveling more abroad and he's probably not spending as much time in India as is required. This is the criticism which the present Prime Minister has been facing from a particular segment of the population. The idea now is, does Make in India actually require his travel abroad or not? In this context, let us pick up certain policies of economics. You all know the Harrod-Domer growth model, which states that in order to grow at a particular rate, you need your investments at a particular rate. So there is a very strong correlation between your investments as a percentage of GDP and the corresponding growth rate that you're going to get. The second argument is, does India have that much of investment as a percentage of GDP, which is required for the desired objective of attaining a particular growth rate? The answer is no. India has a huge saving investment gap. If you look up the first chapter of economic survey, you will realize that there is a huge saving investment gap, which means India's saving as a percentage of GDP is less than India's requirement of investment as a percentage of GDP. So where does this gap get financed from? One method of financing this gap is the foreign direct investment. And Make in India in the 25 sectors is largely coming from the FDI from abroad. Now the question is, if at the ground level you change your policies that we are making FDI more liberal, would it automatically send the right signal to the rest of the world that India has opened up and therefore we need to direct our investments over here? Probably not. And therefore, if it is requiring a physical presence of one of the dignitaries from the government to actually go and say that, yes, we are opening up, probably the message is going to be much stronger than if the same message is made at the paper level. So there is a very strong justification of bringing FDI, which may require a senior government official to go abroad because you're trying to invite FDI in a country which fortunately for now, because of the economic reforms that have been initiated, is on the global map. India is an emerging economy, and we do know that IMF and the other international agencies are saying that this is the bright spot in the global economy, which is we are having the highest growth rate. The second part of the question is what went wrong with India's manufacturing sector that suddenly from agriculture we switched over to services. In this direction, you again have to reflect on the historical perspective of Indian policy making. The first aspect, which I would largely touch upon four aspects. One is the licensing regime. The second is the MRTP policy. The third is the FEAR, FERA regulation at that time. And the fourth is the public sector, which was growing. Largely based upon these four parameters, you will be able to identify what went wrong with India's manufacturing regime. Commencing with the first, what does the licensing regime tell us? You want to set up an industry, take a license. You want to expand your production, you take a license. You want to change the location of your plant from Delhi to Faridabad, yeah, come again, take another license. And if you need to import certain articles for producing certain things, then you better also have an import license. And all this would be under the FERA regulation, Foreign Exchange Regulation Act. Now, if you are going to have all these regulatory mechanisms, the question is, are they good? On paper, yes, they are very justifiable. Each one of them can be justified. What is the logic for a licensing regime? Primarily, equal distribution. You want a regional distribution of growth. Why should we not prioritize investments in Assam vis-a-vis investments in Delhi? So you give a license for setting up a plant only in Assam, not in Delhi. Justifiable on equitable grounds. Secondly, you want in your planning commission, you said we want to grow at a 5%. And for 5% overall growth, steel has to grow at 18%. So additional licenses worth only 18% of steel will be given. Again, it's so very justifiable. We don't want excess or overproduction, nor do we want underproduction. Problem came at the implementation level. Who's going to get a license? License authority is in Delhi. So you must be licensing with the head office in Delhi. So every industry, every firm must have its head office in Delhi. Delays came up. And when you are saying that your licensing regime, including your import licenses, it led to a low quality, high cost kind of a structure. And along with this is the public sector which has come up. So what's the problem with the public sector? There is no empirical evidence based upon data to show that public sector is having a lower productivity as compared to the private sector. But in terms of theory, yes, public sector is not expected to be as efficient, largely for four reasons. One is the objective is probably not profit maximization as it would be for a typical corporate sector. Second is you do not have as effective a shareholder monitoring. Public sector belongs to the government, government belongs to the public, and therefore the entire public sector belongs to you and me. How much are we interested to take care of the public sector? We are not. So there's a problem there also. Does the public sector face the problem of bankruptcy? No. Does the public sector face the problem of takeover? No. So largely for these four reasons, on theoretical grounds, the public sector is expected not to be as efficient and competitive as the corresponding private sector. And therefore, there was a problem with the manufacturing sector. We were unable to compete. Accompanied with our import substitution policy, we were never an export promoting country. Export promotion would have led to competition enhancement. It did not. And this is the time our services are growing. So the question comes up, and very often it is said that services have grown not because of the government, but despite the government. Services was a sector which was not as heavily regulated, especially the ICT. And therefore it could grow. That means there was a problem somewhere down the line with the manufacturing, and probably one could say it was over-regulation. So for sustainability of the manufacturing sector, probably we will wait for the next phase of our interaction. What are the steps that could be taken for the Make in India, for manufacturing sector, to be growing and remaining sustainable? And the question now very rightly has been mentioned by other panelists also. Are we talking about sustainability from just the profit angle, or is it also sustainability from the larger angle which incorporates financial inclusion? It talks about inclusive growth along with socially sustainable growth model, which means you're also going to incorporate your climate aspect. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your description of the manufacturing sector. As you mentioned rightly, we will be discussing how we can go forward. Just want to mention a study that I did some while back when I was at career in 2007. It was a comparative study of India and China, and we were trying to see how we could benefit from the Chinese experience of development and vice versa. This was a study that was supported by the Asian Development Bank. I'm sure these topics will be discussed, but in the context of why the Chinese manufacturing sector took up, and we've certainly got a lot of lessons to learn there. There's a lot we can imbibe. Several things like government policies, government procurement policies, decentralization, okay, government tax policies, okay, did play a major role. One thing that Chinese companies were encouraged to do was exploit the skills from scale and specialization. Sometime later, it's just there's not enough time for this today, right now, but I'll probably, time permitting, I'll tell you my experience with Chinese die manufacturers. So, but before that, let's have Professor Suneja, hear from Professor Suneja, what he thinks is the way forward.
So we've covered agriculture and manufacturing. Let me say something about services. And Rajiv alluded to the fact that, say, Infosys is doing low-level coding, has been stuck at that for a while. And while the Indian IT sector has done well, it's time to move up the value-added chain, and not just in the IT sector, in the services sector generally. We have backroom operations and finance. Can we move up a notch? And I think as far as the micro measures that one can look at, because this round we're looking at some micro reforms, I think is the kind of education that we impart is going to be a critical factor. I was mentioning to Rajiv earlier that in my student days, I did not, in fact, I still don't have a black suit. All of you look lovely in your wonderful cloned black suits.
You probably have 10 of each.
We didn't have PowerPoint. I mean, this branding exercise, right? Look at the kind of posters, right? Finance summit, marketing summit, entrepreneurship summit. It's amazing. Nothing of that. But the whole point of a PowerPoint, one, do your points have any power? Yes. This point was made to me by, Tibet doesn't have a government, but has a government in exile. And we had invited the, before they formed a democratic government, Samdong Rinpoche used to be the so-called PM in exile. And we called him for a conference at Delhi University. We're talking about Krishnamurti, the philosopher's contributions and so forth. And I asked him naively, sir, do you have a PowerPoint? And he says, I'm a PM in exile, so I do not have any power. I do not have any substantial point to make, but if you permit me, I'd like to have a discussion. So if you're going to move up the value chain, if Infosys is now going to produce products and do rather than just do, low-level IT coolie work, yes, then we have to become creative. Typically in Europe, after school, they take a year off, go and see the world, learn a few languages, see where the entrepreneurial opportunities are, where our interests lie, and then you follow your heart. There's one book which I use now to open my strategy class. I used to start strategy in a standard way. I've given it all up. And I recommend this book to each one of you. It's called Creativity Incorporated. It's by Ed Catmull, the founder of Pixar. People who make Inside Out and the computer animation, computer animated movies, which are such a joy to watch. Yes, Toy Story and Toy Story 2 and so on. It's the company which Steve Jobs invested in once he was thrown out of Apple. You know Steve Jobs' story. Yes. He was thrown out of the Apple, which he founded because he became arrogant. He went and invested in Pixar, and then he came back. And then Pixar later on was merged with the Walt Disney Corporation. And the book is called Creativity Incorporated. It says, how do you incorporate creativity in organizations? Not just at individual levels, but an organizational level. And if we do not start with education, with schools, with business schools, yes, we think, we debate, we have a dialogue, we think differently, we go and see the country, we stay in villages, we see what the opportunities are, nothing is going to work. From where are you going to get entrepreneurship? From where are you going to get innovation? Look at startups in India. Yes, great excitement, wonderful. But now they are beginning to, many of them, fizzle out because they only became a channel for making quick money. Nothing else. Make quick money. Try and scale. You don't know the world. You haven't seen the problems. You've never been to a village. And unless you do that, and unless you talk and you can be creative and work in teams, which is something we Indians are very poor at generally, then how on earth are we going to have innovative blue sky solutions? And none of the orthodox solutions are going to work in India. Our geography, our demographic, our population, land ratios are vastly different from anything in the West. So if you think we're going to ape Western solutions, it's going to be a complete disaster. It's not going to happen, neither employment-wise nor ecologically. So creativity, and you people are here in business schools. Business is the art of creating value. That's what you do. How many of you have an engineering background? Old class. Old class. And now you want to sell soap. I mean, what a national waste this is. We have IITs, we have NITs, and everybody. Kitne aapne labs, quantum and God knows what other labs, and you want to sell soap. If you work for finance companies, you'll sell derivatives for companies which sell soap. So when I asked, why did you do engineering? They say, oh, it helps our mental skills. We become sharper. Yes, तो भाई chess खेल लेते. इतने resources देश के लगे. इंजीनियरिंग का तब फायदा है जब उस इंजीनियरिंग से आप कोई सॉल्यूशन बनाओ जिससे फिर आप बेच पाओ रूरल इंडिया के अंदर, अर्बन पुअर के अंदर. हाउसिंग, आई मीन when we made a house in Punjabi Bagh, our neighbors suggested, and that's the only innovation in our house, कि जो water tank है वो इतना गर्म हो जाता है तो क्या करो कि 2 bricks के बीच में थोड़ा gap छोड़ दो और उसमें भूसा डाल दो. We followed that and the water remains cool. But if you go to Red Fort and if you get a guide, guides are pretty pathetic generally, but if you get a good guide, the first thing he'll do is knock on the walls of Red Fort and the walls are hollow, like a thermos flask. Imagine the energy saving you can do there. You engineers, can you find a way, an innovative way of using building materials that will save on electricity costs? Because that's a huge saving you can do. And Delhi University, where I used to work in the central building, this is the Vice Regal Lodge, where before Rashtrapati Bhavan was built for a long time, the Viceroy used to stay there. It's a Vice Regal Lodge. And even without electricity, there was a power cut, the building remains cool, while FMS is completely fumes. Why? The walls are thick. But ऊपर सबसे बड़ी बात है, roof के ऊपर 1.5 foot fine alluvial soil. जो यमुना से लेके उन्होंने 1.5 foot soil डाल के फिर प्लास्टर किया. That soil keeps the building cool. Where in Delhi do you get this anymore? So what I'm suggesting to you is, if services sector is going to be a key cornerstone of our success going forward, let's at least make it innovative. Let's make it creative. Sure, we have to have manufacturing, but with services, we don't just have to follow the Western model. Let's be creative about it. And you people in business schools with your engineering background are exactly the right people who think about it. So do think about it.
I'd now like to call upon Mr. Prasad to make his remarks.
Okay. I have been asked to cover the banking and skill development, and particularly the policy required. In my view, the policies in both the sectors are very well known now by this time. what is of critical importance is that implementation. In banking sector, I'll particularly focus on the Jan Dhan Yojana, which was also mentioned, which is about inclusiveness, including those who do not have access to finance and banking, and the whole efforts on banking correspondent, payment banking, and also the efforts on DBT, direct benefit transfer. That will really link, if it succeeds with the Digital India, to connect each and every household, including postal banks and all that. So the policy framework is already in place by this time. What is required is implementation both successfully of Digital India, banking correspondent, DBT, and Jan Dhan Yojana for inclusiveness. On the larger bank side, you have really identified that NPAs is the very critical, and you also saw the solutions. Now, as I mentioned in my previous remarks also, the issue is to identify, if you see the NPAs, it has been primarily because the failure of large projects in infrastructure, be highways, road, power sector. Now, some of the failures are attributable to the management or mismanagement. And there, it is definitely required that a quick action is taken. But large number of failures are also due to other reasons. You know, large road projects fail because of the land acquisition, large power projects, environmental clearances, also changes in global scenario, dumping in steel and all that. So it is it requires a very skillful handling so that we are able to identify those who requires to be punished. But at the same time, the sectors or the companies which require support and restructuring, that is also to be given. So it is a mix of the balance. I'll limit my comment on this to that extent. Skill development, the basic problem in our country on the skill development is that very few people want to go to a skill development vocational course unless they end all the possibilities of education and higher education. And the problem because there is no linkage, or if you go to the vocational course, there is no way to come back to the professional or the educational curriculum. So government has already identified and is working on national qualification framework where you can easily move between the vocational courses and the formal education, so that with confidence at 12th you can go to the vocational course, the area on which you want to work, and at some stage if you want to take higher education you can come back. Now again, the contents and the issues have been clearly identified. It is how fast we are able to create the national framework, and also the mechanism for certification, curriculum, training development, and all that issues. So in my views, more than the policies at this stage, it is the implementational challenges which has to be tackled with effectiveness.
What I'd like to do now is essentially, this is going to be a very quick round, simply because we have until 11:30. Do we have a grace period a little bit because for student questions, or we just have to clear out? We have a grace period. Okay. So what I will do now is request the panelists to identify, essentially, like, just assume you're making 3 bullet points on what needs to be done. Mr. Prabhudatta can speak about agriculture, Professor Kaur can speak about manufacturing, and so forth and so on. But 3 bullet points on what needs to be done for sustainable development of their respective sectors. I'll start with this. Just 3 bullet points. And I mean, followed by little.
Yeah, to my mind, for sustainable agriculture, I feel that there should be some kind of a policy on use of water for agriculture, because excessive water use is an issue and is going to be very critical in next 20-30 years. Second point is price for the farmers. To make agriculture sustainable, if we don't want farmer suicide to take place, then price of the agriculture commodities should be stabilized. If there is any instance of anywhere prices are falling, government has to intervene. I support even artificially it is kept at certain level, but it should be sustainable. And third thing is to make farmers get out of agriculture as much as possible is by way of increasing the education in the farming community. If you impart education, that is the best way you can tackle, because there is no other as of now. It is not practically possible that you will bring out something and give employment, because unless and until you increase the education level, their children will be then in a position to decide their own course of action. That is the best way government can do. Thank you, sir.
I'd now like to invite Professor Kaur to make her remarks.
Thank you so much. At the background, again, we have moved from the MDGs to the SDGs, Millennium Development Goals, to Sustainable Development Goals, which means we are no longer just talking about poverty and hunger, but sustainability of the development. And therefore, when we are also talking about growth, the question comes, how much inclusiveness are we talking about the growth? And to what extent is it also going to talk about the environment aspect? And asked to speak on the manufacturing sector. There are problems with the manufacturing sector presently. And let us now talk about just more on the growth side and not necessarily more on the inclusive or the environmental growth, which will be my last point. But the first 2 points would largely be concentrating on how to make the manufacturing sector a sustainable sector. Also, a very large part of development economics, we don't have any miracle capsule to be given to any country. And if had that miracle capsule been there, every economy in the world would have been equally grown as the most developed economies. During the 60s, when you were taking money from the IMF, it was on the condition that increase the size of the government. Today, from the same institutions, when you are taking funding, it is on the condition that there should be a reduced role of the government. So does it mean that even the world, the recognized institutions don't have enough of knowledge? They keep changing their stance? The answer is yes, economics is a growing theory. So what we are recommending today, the 3 solutions, may not actually turn out to be the best of the solutions 30 years down the line. It is country specific, and it is also very time specific for a particular country. Nevertheless, based upon the economic fundamentals that we do know upon, which are the major bottlenecks leading to not having a higher growth in the manufacturing sector, is the first would be we don't have good infrastructure. If you look up the Global Competitiveness Index, infrastructure is one of the major pillars. And we do know that our competitiveness index is low. And infrastructure, whether you talk about the telecom sector, whether it's the power sector, whether it is the transport sector, or whether it is the water and sanitation sector, which are largely the 4 infrastructure parameters, physical infrastructure, we are not good at any of these fronts. So to say that you have to increase the power availability, yes, but so do you have to increase the road density, the railway density, the ICT communication index. ICT index is also very low. So a lot needs to be done on the infrastructure front, point number 1. Point number 2 would be, just because you have infrastructure, but if the infrastructure is not backed by conducive institutional environment, no kind of physical investment can be a sustainable investment. So what promotes a conducive institutional setup? It would largely be your regulatory setups. It would largely be your law and order and your judiciary setup. And we have seen these kind of things happening. MRTP has given way to Competition Commission of India. implying that competition is something which is going to be leading to sustainability. And it's not an anti-monopoly, it's a pro-competition kind of an environment. We also need institutions in terms of the banking sector. If you don't have a strong financial sector, no matter how much you try to improve your manufacturing sector, there will be a major bottleneck coming from the banking industry. So there are reforms that are required in that sector. We have initiated steps in the right direction. A lot more needs to be done. India's regulatory setup is considered to be one of the best amongst the world, but that doesn't mean that you don't have further improvement capability. The third point would be no sustainability can be endured without competition. So you have to promote competition, and to the extent competition is coming from, let's say, greenfield privatization, which means areas which were earlier only reserved for the public sector are now open up for the private sector, be in the form of PPP model. You have your bought, boot, and bolt issues. We do expect such things to bring about more efficiency and competition. Also, sustainability now coming from the inclusiveness in terms of climate. You have to be energy efficient, especially in the present system where we've been facing the triple F crisis, your food, fuel, and your finance. We have seen that the fuel prices are falling, rising. There is so much of volatility. And with a volatility in your fuel pricing, which is also affecting your food and finance, a lot needs to be done in order to bring about stability in this particular sector. And finally, I would also try to say that unless we change each one of us personally, just changing the firms, the approach has to be changed, not at the firm level, but also at individual level for the ultimate inclusive sustainability of any growth model, be it manufacturing, agriculture, or services sector. It has to be brought about. We are all responsible for that, and we all need to work on it. Thank you so much.
Professor Suneja.
Just to say something about linking sustainability in India with sustainability questions globally. We've had Brexit recently, and if you notice, the parts of the British population that voted to get out of Britain, which is against integration with the global and European community, were essentially the people who are out of manufacturing jobs in Wales and in England. The city of London, of course, wanted by a 60-40 margin to remain within the European Union. If you look at Trump supporters, which is really ironical, and here's a millionaire who has a tower in Bombay and golf courses in Scotland. And the people who are supporting him are the ones who would originally have supported the Democrats. The blue-collar workers who are out of jobs. Again, because most of them are migrated to China. So there's an issue of sustainability globally that also has to be borne in mind. And I think that's something that the ex-governor of RBI, Raghuram Rajan, had in mind when he said it's not just a question of make in India, it's also probably a question of make for India. Because after all, a large economy like India, especially after China already has such a big manufacturing base, a large economy with 1/6 of the world's population, it cannot rely on exports for sustaining its growth. Of course, we need exports and we need export competitiveness. That goes without saying, because we have a huge oil bill and we also want to be linked to the world economy. But that's not going to be the major macro driver of growth. In fact, it's quite clear that one of the reasons India escaped the financial distress brought about by the last financial meltdown, because we were largely dependent on our own home demand. And therefore, if home demand is to keep growing, then unless you do something with the rural sector, where most of our population is, you're not going to be able to sustain that demand. I mean, this demand is not going to come from the way the demand has come for exports from China. So you're going to have to grow your rural sector. And that therefore calls again for innovative, creative solutions. So my message is fairly simple. Human resources are the key resource that India has. We don't have much of oil or much of any other, no diamonds left. And unless we can tap into our human resources and do a leapfrog, we don't just become cogs and wheels for the industrial revolution. Unless we become creative, and business schools, unless they can become creative, then frankly, the kind of solutions that we have borrowed from the West and historical solutions, I do not think they're going to work in India. So we need all the kind of things that we've been talking about, but we need to be innovative and creative about them. Unless we tailor them to Indian conditions, then it's going to be difficult to see how we move forward. So let's think long, broad, deep, but most importantly, not just think for ourselves. If we're going to consider ourselves, our selfish interests, material interests as the be-all, yes, it's very difficult to see how social cohesion, how social harmony is going to be maintained. Then we become another United States with unemployment in Detroit outstripping, and the crime rates in Detroit outstripping practically crime rates anywhere in the world. You know, amongst the lowest crime rates in the world are in Calcutta, far lower than in Detroit. So if you're going to maintain social harmony, if you're going to have an Indian dream, then we have to think not just creatively, but think together for all of us. Thank you.
I'd now like to invite Mr. Prasad to make his 3 bullet points on skills and banking.
Well, in the sustainability context, I think that the sustainability in terms of resource conservation and sustainability in terms of economics, in terms of maintaining the demand, and also some kind of a political sustainability in the sense that general people stay together on the issues and policies have already been raised. Now, energy and water resource sustainability, it is basically referring to, in broader resource context, is energy and water, which Mr. Mishra mentioned. And in terms of bullet points, one of the issues which comes to my mind is managing the subsidy by the government. The subsidy in terms of, at one point, it was required to subsidize energy, agricultural activities, but that has also led to a lot of wastage, both in sector of energy and water resources. In terms of skill, there is a huge opportunity of energy efficiency activities, and also in terms of opportunities for sustaining the economic demands, social inclusiveness. All these would require the various schemes I mentioned, where rural population, illiterate populations are adequately empowered in terms of skills, financial inclusion, and also opportunities for doing something in terms of ease of doing business.
Before I invite questions from the audience, I'd just like to make a few concluding remarks based on, just very humbly add on to what my very distinguished colleagues in the panel have already stated. When it comes to agriculture, I think one thing that was kind of left unsaid was about productivity. Mr. Prabhudatta did mention about wastage in the form of water, etc. But one thing is that our total factor productivity in agriculture is among the lowest in the world. We've simply just been increasing the acreage of land that we have, and to that extent, our production has been growing, but then our production per acre is among the lowest in the world, and this is across categories, whether it's cereals, vegetables, fruits, etc. It's a miracle that despite being a space constraint, this thing, we are still in the top 2 or 3 producers, but it could be a miracle. It would actually be really transformative if total factor productivity was given the importance it kind of deserves. Now, it would be another discussion to talk about what needs to be done to boost total factor productivity in agriculture, but that's a separate question, but then that's something still pending. When it comes to manufacturing, government procurement policies, etc., are very important. But one thing that our policies over the years, and Professor Kaur did kind of allude to it in passing, is that policies have systematically discouraged the formation of what they call the agglomeration economies. That prevents kind of scaling up, etc. So all countries that have grown, you're seeing a lot of clustering, okay, that actually end up reducing transaction costs, mostly information costs, and reduce the costs of information asymmetry that come from information asymmetry. There's systematic work, empirical evidence that shows that countries that overcome information asymmetries by way of clustering and agglomeration do a lot better where kind of manufacturing activities are more diffuse. So pretty much those were my comments about the others. I completely agree with Professor Prasad about his emphasis on skill development, what needs to be done for the banking sector, because the ills of the banking sector both percolate upwards and downwards. They impact savings in terms of, discouraging savings people from going into the banking sector, the formal banking sector, and then they increase the cost of capital. What happens in this process is you throw out the baby with the bathwater. So you don't only punish the culprits, the people who've had this history of defaulting on loans, but then you prevent or preclude credit to people who actually deserve it with sound business plans, and so everybody suffers. I'd like to throw the questions open to the audience. Before you ask your question, please take the trouble of introducing yourself to the panel. Thank you. Questions, please. Your turn. There, in the corner there. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, sir. My name is Kushag Gupta. And my questions, I'll break it down into two parts. The first question is that why are we in India trying to emulate models which have already been adopted by countries like export-oriented companies like Japan, US, and South Korea? All these countries basically grew on the export-oriented models. And then the second thing is, why as a country, we in India cannot reduce the size of the bureaucracy? We never come across this solution. We discuss about a lot of solutions, but we never discuss about the overburdened bureaucracy in India. So can reducing the size of bureaucracy be a solution to our problems as well?
Is there anyone to whom you specifically wanted to direct this question?
No, sir. It's open to you.
So you want to
Well, I would not entirely agree on your first part that our efforts is to emulate any other economy. But we should also learn from other economy. When any efforts on being export oriented essentially means you have to be globally competitive. The crux of that, if you succeed in global market, you have to be globally efficient. And to that extent, testing yourself in the global market is the right opportunity. If you want to be just confined to your Indian market, many times you may sustain with not so competitive, inefficient industry. And to that extent, and also size of economy itself, what are your size? Your size is $1 trillion. And the world is, US is $13 trillion, China is $4 trillion. So if you don't serve that market, okay, so you need to capture that, given a size of population, which you are 15-16% of the world population. You need, in some sense, in whatever form, but we are also inward looking. As I mentioned, there are schemes, efforts to go to the rural areas, meet their demands. That is the first part. About the size of the bureaucracy, it is not how do you reduce the size of bureaucracy, it is bureaucracy does. If you move towards like giving license, if you need someone to give license, you need that whole structure. If you need monitors that whether licensing conditions are being met, you need people to do that. If you allocate resources through subsidy, you need organization to do that. So the whole efforts of reducing bureaucracy is to managing the activities government does. And that is why, as part of ease of doing business, large number of activities are being moved from government doing to it to self-certification, third-party certifications, IT, like you are moving from manual thing to the IT. So more and more application of technology will reduce the size of bureaucracy. But we also must realize areas which are opening up where government is expected to perform, like education, skill development. There are roles of private sector, but many people continue to believe services will have to be provided or continue to be provided by the government, whether it is education, healthcare, skill development, basic regulatory framework, law and order. So there is a limit to the extent the government can reduce the bureaucracy, though there is an opportunity for enhancing the efficiency and use of technology.
Just to add to what Mr. Prasad said, first thing is our boom time growth between 2003 and 2008. 2008 was a boom growth, if you average like 8, was essentially driven by exports growing nominally at 25%. So unless exports, we regain that kind of export momentum, okay, we're not going to grow at 9%. That's not sustainable growth. So we are not an export-oriented economy in the way this was, but that's a political economy question, and I won't answer it now. Coming back to bureaucracy, okay, bureaucracy is the iron framework. So if you look at what led to the growth of Western Europe and the United States, the bureaucracy did provide what they call the iron framework, okay? Regulation is not bad. It is excess regulation that's bad. So the idea is not to abolish regulation, but to find the optimal level of regulation. And there's a lot of theoretical work in that area. In fact, one current problem in what they call mechanism design actually deals with exactly this. Though there's already work in the area earlier, but then mechanism design is taking a new approach to look at the optimal level of regulation, okay? And one thing that you must keep in mind is that markets are not no bureaucracy. Markets doesn't mean no government, no bureaucracy. Markets function best when there's an institutional framework, okay, to keep in place, okay, to ensure that rules, regulations, and norms are followed, okay? Otherwise, the system will collapse. Markets work best when institutions are in place, and it's the bureaucracy that actually populates institutions. Thank you. Next question, please. Pallavi.
Hello, myself Pallavi. I have a question regarding the agriculture sector. As you were mentioning that we should have mechanization in agriculture. But if we do that, what about the unemployment? As we say, if once robot or anything comes into the picture, there's no going back. Then how will the rural people work? Will it not lead to more unemployment? So what are your suggestions about what things can be done for them?
I see it as an opportunity. When computer was introduced, same question was raised, there will be unemployment. Do you think there is unemployment because of computer? No, like that. When mechanization will take place, there will be skill labor. The same people who are working now, they will be provided the skill so that they can operate the machines. And there are several kind of machines now available, and that will ultimately increase the productivity. The more mechanization we adopt, there will be more increase in quality in educational, in agriculture also. So there will be skilled labor. Same labor can be trained. There will be no kind of unemployment as such.
I'll just have Professor Kaur and then
Sure. Yes, these are apprehensions with the mechanization and computerization very rightly addressed. But if you have a look at the larger picture of Indian agriculture, it is practically the low productivity. So the question comes, how do you improve the productivity levels, which could be factor productivity partial or the total factor? mechanization is one of the tools. But to my mind, more than mechanization, which would be largely capital stock being added, if you have a look at the capital stock, per person, per worker, capital stock for an Indian agricultural farmer is about 1700 US dollar in 2005 prices. In the United States, it is 90,000 USD dollar, 2005 prices. That means the capital stock per person in India is less than 5% of the counterparts in the developed countries. So there is a huge gap. So the question is, even if we are trying to increase the mechanization, and the worst part is the gap between the capital stock per person has been increasing over the time. So disparities are widening. So yes, something needs to be done. Not necessarily. See, the question is, are you looking at it from employment angle in the short run or employability in the long run? Also, is the person who's employed in the agriculture sector actually employed? It's all about disguised unemployment. So if you have mechanization, which is promoting people to move outside of the agriculture, work in the farm sector, moving out to the urban sector may not necessarily be good, because from rural poverty, you then become an urban poor person. Therefore, mechanization is important. Also, there is an index known as Agricultural Orientation Index, which normally talks about what percentage of government expenditure goes on agriculture divided by the contribution of agriculture. This in India is just about, for most of the South Asian countries, is 0.27. That means agriculture is not getting its due. Now, the question is, if it is not getting its due, in which direction is the due required? It's largely in the form of irrigation. And if you say irrigation is also a form of mechanization, at least it's increasing the capital stock in the water sector, it is certainly a desirable factor, because multiplier effects of irrigation are large. But if you're probably thinking only in terms of tractorization or something like that, Indian agriculture has been said to be a victim of its own success. We have very, very concentrated rural development in Punjab, Haryana, and Western UP, and it is also very cereal-centric. Mechanization might lead to it becoming pulse-centric, and over the time, as economies grow from agrarian system to transitional economies, where diet diversification is going to take place, there is a need for us to move away from the normal kind of crops that are grown to a crop system which is catering to your diet diversification. And ultimately, if you want to align your present policies with the ultimate objective of becoming an urban economy, then you need your food processing industry. That again would require some kind of a mechanization in the farms. Thank you.
Professor Kaur has broadly covered the point. The employment has to be sustained through diversification and also by adding values. That is the point I wanted to make.
Next question, please. Okay. I'm told by Pratik that this will be the last question. Would have liked for more student participation, but just one more, please. I'm sorry.
My name is Shubhadeep.
Okay, yeah, sure.
My question is to Professor Vivek Suneja, that the unorganized sector is a huge, that is a huge task for us to organize the unorganized sector. Like in case of Amul, it organized the dairy sector, but when it was tried in other sectors, like in case of Rickshawalas in Bihar, Samman Foundation, but it also started falling down for last 2-3 years. So what is the way forward for this unorganized sector, and how can we proceed, and your view on it?
I honestly don't know. But the Amul story is a great success story. And I think it's a story that we must try and emulate in as many sectors as possible. The sugarcane story in Maharashtra, the cooperative, is a disaster. While the NDDB story, the mother dairy story, we all know. Yes, you people are too young to recollect the times we have seen where our parents would line up in morning in Delhi to get their milk bottles. Yes, and now there's abundance of milk. But the best part is that most of this income goes back to farmers. Why we can't do this? And this is a crucial question for agriculture. One of the reasons productivity is low is because of land fragmentation. Yes, people, when they're children born, there's not enough non-farm jobs, so they inherit the same piece of land and land gets fragmented. And that's one of the reasons why there's low productivity. But if you can have cooperatives, yes, we might have a possible solution. But whether it's land or fisheries, the real question is organizational. The difference between the Maharashtrian and the Amul is one is political interference, but the other is Korean. Yes, Korean was not even an MBA. He was a dairy engineer. But he pioneered. If you've seen Manthan, the movie, I don't know anybody's seen that, but you can see it on YouTube. That's what he did. It's common sense. Pool in your resources, improve your livestock, plow back money. And look, the milk is collected from millions of, I mean, forget HUL, forget, I mean, you talk about supply chain management, there is nothing comparable to Amul. Amul now, by the way, has a higher turnover in HUL. Yes, there is nothing comparable because this is a perishable product. You collect milk morning and evening from millions of farmers. You process it using the latest technology. Yes. So you're combining small with large, the unorganized with the organized. And you're not just selling milk. You know, you're selling all kinds of ice creams and all kind of manufactured, where values added. And yet the money is going back to the farmers. So when I mean creativity, this is the creativity I have in mind. There's an engineering background. So you build milk processing plants and you make ice cream plants. But you link with your rural economy. You don't do it just for profit maximization. You do it more of a stakeholder model. You link it with the urban economy, and yet it is sustainable. Those are kind of creative solutions we have to have in education, whether it's on the net. Why can't you have a class for rural kids in the evening time and link up with small business schools in Nagpur or even smaller places? Those are possibilities. Only our mind, our imagination is what will hold us back. Otherwise, there's capital, there's technology, there's management. It's only commitment to a nation, not just to ourselves. It's a wider view of ourselves as human beings, not as economic organisms which eat and drink, because even pigs do that and reproduce and do well. Yes, and if we can have that holistic vision of life and think about it, anything can be done.
Okay. All good things must come to an end. And this certainly, in my opinion at least, has been a very good thing. I want to thank all my panelists, fellow panelists, for taking the time, interrupting their schedules on a Sunday to be with us. But unfortunately, we would have liked to hear more from them. I'm sure you had a lot more questions, but there's something to follow. And Prateek has just signaled to me that that's it. So, much as I would like to continue, I'm just going to have to declare it. You can make your comments, and then from our end, we've said all that we've had to say. Thank you.
On behalf of everyone present here, I express my sincere gratitude to Dr. Arvind Prasad, Dr. Vivek Suneja, Dr. Simrit Kaur, and Mr. Prabhudatta Mishra for having taken out time from their busy schedules and sharing their valuable inputs with us. Professor Anandram started the session with a focus on micro-formalization of all sectors, and he also asked us to ponder about whether institutional reforms have gone deep enough. He also focused for a need for a bottoms-up approach instead of a top-down approach. The session started with Mr. Prabhudatta Mishra focusing on price sustainability and his views that the price needs to be stabilized. Then Simrit Kaur ma'am, she talked about the manufacturing sector, and she said that there needs to be a focus on infrastructure and a conducive institutional sectors. Then Dr. Suneja, he talked about focus on creativity and a need to tailor solutions to in the Indian context. Dr. Arvind Prasad talked about banking and skill development. He expressed his need for transition from vocational training to higher education, and he considers it very important. So with this, we come to the end of the session, and ma'am and sirs, we thank you for your valuable knowledge that you have imparted to us during the session, and I'm sure that we all shall keep it in mind for our future. I'd also take this opportunity to thank Professor Rajiv Anantram for consenting to be the moderator for the session and conducting the session in a highly coordinated manner.
Now, I would request our distinguished speakers to please sign the mugs with a message for all of us. We would now like to present the distinguished speakers for the session with a small token of our gratitude. I would request Professor Pinaki Das Gupta to please present Dr. Arvind Prasad with a memento as a gesture of our gratitude. I would request Professor V.K. Seth to present Dr. Vivek Suneja with a memento as a gesture of our gratitude. I would request Professor Arnav Deb to please present Dr. Simrit Kaur with a memento as a gesture of our gratitude.
Appreciate the efficiency.
I would request Professor Alok to please present Mr. Prabhudat Mishra with a memento as a gesture of our gratitude. I would request Prateek Gupta, Secretary of Economics Club, to present Dr. Rajiv Anantram with a memento as a gesture of our gratitude.
Ladies and gentlemen, with this, we conclude the session of the Economic Summit. We are sure that the session has been very enlightening for each and every one of you present over here. On behalf of the Economics Club of IMI, I would like to take this opportunity to commend all the guests, speakers, professors, students, and staff of IMI for making the session an unparalleled success, as well as the media person for covering the event. We would also like to thank our sponsors for helping us in this endeavor. Our sponsors are co-sponsors RP Sanjeev Goenka Group, powered by Panasonic Smartphones, a beverage partner Hector Beverages, food partner Pattern Harry and Burger.in, nutrition partner India Gate, website partner Acunity Software Private Limited, other sponsors American Express, CADB, Respite Holdings, Save Pocket Money, NTPC, Allahabad Bank, Punjab National Bank, Uber, and Pizza Hut. Thank you all. We request the guests to kindly proceed to the lobby area for tea. Students are requested to kindly stay back.
Thank you very much. Hope we can meet again.
Yes, yes, we want.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thanks, sir. Sir, we'll bring it in the photo. We'll bring it.
You can have bag.
Yeah, we'll bring it. Yeah, I'll just leave it in my bag.
All the
Yes, I have it. Thank you all.
We can leave now. वो सिग्नल ही नहीं कर रहा वहाँ पे कौन कर रहा है